Scene of one of the most infamous stories of 2018. It's the home in Frederick where Chris Watts murdered his family. And now we know it'll be sold at auction in April. Weld County records show Chris Watts did purchase the home for just over $392,000 and still owes nearly $350,000 on it.
Chris Watts reportedly back on the market. Of course, Christopher Watts convicted to 5 life sentences behind bars for killing his wife and 2 kids back in 2018. A horrifying situation. According to TMZ, the 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house in Frederick that they lived in was taken by the bank and sold in 2022 for $600,000. Now it's listed for $775,000.
If you're drawn to the stories hidden in the shadows, subscribe to Dark Corner True Crime, where every case has a secret waiting to be uncovered.
On a quiet street in Frederick, Colorado, stands a modern 2-story house that looks at first glance like any other suburban dream. Neatly trimmed lawns, wide driveways, and neighboring homes built for growing families. Nothing about it warns you. Nothing about it prepares you. Yet this house carries a question that still unsettles people years later. Would you live here? Before we go any further, welcome to Dark Corner True Crime. This is a place where we search for the truth hidden in the shadows of cold cases and closed files. We don't rush the story. We sit with the facts, the silence, and the uncomfortable questions many would rather ignore. If you value this kind of deep dive investigation, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as we begin this journey together, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Whether you're joining us from the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world, leave a comment below. It reminds us that, although these stories are local, their impact reaches across the globe. In August 2018, this house was home to Shanann Watts and her 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. Inside its walls were family photos, children's laughter, and everyday routines shared online with friends and followers. From the outside, it looked like a life many people recognized. Busy mornings, late nights, and plans for the future. There were no visible warning signs, no signs of the nightmare that was about to unfold. When Shanann and her children were reported missing, the house became the center of a rapidly unfolding investigation. Police body camera footage later revealed officers walking through the home's rooms, their footsteps echoing through hallways filled with unsettling stillness. The children's beds were made. Toys were scattered as if playtime had simply paused. Everything felt disturbingly normal, too normal. Days later, the truth shattered that illusion. Chris Watts confessed to murdering his pregnant wife and their 2 young daughters. The shock rippled far beyond Colorado. This wasn't a crime scene hidden in isolation. It was a family home in a peaceful neighborhood. A place designed for safety, comfort, and love, turned into the backdrop of unimaginable violence. After the sentencing, the house was left behind, empty, silent. Neighbors passed it without looking. Years went by and no one moved in. Online debates grew, with people calling it cursed, haunted, or forever tainted. But the real question remained unanswered. Is the darkness in the walls, or in what we remember? This house did not commit the crime, but it witnessed everything. And in the chapters ahead, we'll explore what became of it, why it remained empty for so long, and whether any place can ever truly be free from the weight of its past. After the world learned the truth about what happened inside the Watts family home, something strange followed. Not chaos, not noise, but silence. The house at 2825 Saratoga Trail was no longer just a property. It became a symbol, and for years it stood completely empty, as if time itself had stopped at the moment the tragedy occurred. In the weeks following Chris Watts' arrest and confession, the house was locked and left behind. Shanann's family took what they could: personal belongings, photos, and items that still carried emotional weight. But much of the home remained exactly as it had been. The walls still echoed with memories of everyday life, while the outside world watched from a distance. Neighbors later described the house as unsettling, not because of anything supernatural, but because of what it represented. Curtains stayed drawn. Lights were never turned on. During holidays, when the rest of the neighborhood glowed with decorations and warmth, the Watts house remained dark. People slowed their cars as they passed it, some out of curiosity, others out of disbelief. many avoided looking at it altogether. The house quickly became a destination for true crime followers. Strangers drove by to take photos or stand quietly on the sidewalk. Some left flowers. Others whispered theories about what really happened behind those walls. This constant attention only deepened the discomfort for the community. What was once a normal family home had become a reminder of how suddenly life could unravel. Legally, the situation was complicated. After Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ownership of the house fell into limbo. Mortgage payments stopped. The bank eventually moved toward foreclosure. For years, the property remained unoccupied, not because it couldn't be sold, but because no one wanted to be the one to live there. Real estate experts have long acknowledged that homes tied to violent crimes often suffer from psychological stigma. Even when fully renovated, even when time has passed, buyers hesitate. They imagine the headlines. They picture the news footage. They wonder how it would feel to sleep in a room where tragedy once occurred. And so, the Watts house waited. Grass grew uneven in the yard. Snow piled up in winter and melted without footsteps disturbing it. Seasons changed, but nothing inside changed with them. The house became a quiet monument to a crime that refused to fade from public memory. But silence never lasts forever. As years passed, questions grew louder. Could the house ever be sold? Could a new family truly start over there? Or was the stigma too deep to erase? In the next chapter, we'll follow what happened when the Watts family home finally returned to the market, and why that moment reopened wounds many thought had begun to heal. By the time the Watts family home quietly returned to the real estate market, nearly 4 years had passed since the murders. On paper, it should have been an easy sale. The house was large, modern, and located in a desirable Colorado neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, a growing community with good schools nearby. In any other circumstance, it would have attracted buyers almost instantly. But this was not an ordinary listing. When the home was officially foreclosed and placed back on the market, it was listed at a price significantly lower than similar homes in the area. Even then, interest was cautious and limited. Many potential buyers backed away as soon as they learned the address. Others toured the house but never returned. The structure was sound, the rooms freshly cleaned, yet something invisible lingered, an emotional weight no inspection report could measure. Colorado law does not require sellers to disclose deaths in a home unless specifically asked. Still, in this case, disclosure was unavoidable. A simple online search connected the address to one of the most infamous family murder cases in modern American history. Anyone considering the property inevitably confronted the same question. Could they separate the house from the crime? Real. Estate agents familiar with the listing later explained that reactions were intense. Some visitors felt uncomfortable standing inside for more than a few minutes. Others reported an overwhelming sense of sadness. Parents imagined their own children in the bedrooms upstairs. Couples questioned how a place meant for family life could become the site of such betrayal. Public opinion was deeply divided. Some argued that the house was just wood, drywall, and concrete, incapable of holding evil. Others believed certain places absorbed the trauma inflicted within them. Online forums debated whether the home should be demolished, renovated, or left empty forever. For many, the idea of raising children there felt unthinkable. Eventually, in 2022, the house did sell. A family purchased it with plans to move forward, not backward. No dramatic announcement followed. No grand rebranding. Just a quiet transaction, carried out with the hope that time could soften what memory could not erase. But even after the sale, attention did not disappear. True crime followers continued to track the address. Neighbors worried the house would always attract curiosity, and the question persisted. Could new occupants ever truly make it home, or would the past always follow them? In the next chapter, we'll examine what it means to live in a place marked by tragedy, and whether a house can ever escape the shadow of the crime that once defined it. Once the Watts family home was finally occupied again, a new chapter quietly began, one without headlines, courtrooms, or flashing police lights. On the surface, life appeared to move forward. Cars returned to the driveway. Lights turned on at night. The house, for the first time in years, looked lived in again. But the question remained, both for the new occupants and for the public watching from afar. Can a house ever truly be separated from what happened inside it? For many people, a home is more than a physical structure. It's a place where memories are created, routines are formed, and safety is assumed. When violence shatters that expectation, the emotional damage can extend beyond the victims to the space itself. Psychologists often describe this as place-based trauma, the idea that certain locations become permanently associated with fear, grief, or betrayal in the human mind. In the case of the Watts home, that association was powerful. The crime was extensively documented. Police footage, interrogation videos, and media coverage turned the house into a recognizable symbol of deception and loss. Even for those who never stepped inside, the images were enough to create a lasting imprint. Some believe time is the only true cleanser. As years pass and generations change, memories fade. New laughter replaces old sorrow. Others argue that certain events leave a permanent mark, no matter how many coats of paint are added or how many families come and go. In online discussions, people often ask whether they would feel watched, uneasy, or emotionally burdened living there, even knowing the danger is long gone. There are no confirmed reports of paranormal activity connected to the Watts house, no official claims of hauntings. What lingers is not something supernatural, but psychological. The knowledge of what happened there changes how people experience the space. Silence feels louder. Ordinary rooms feel heavier. For the current residents, privacy has been critical. They did not commit the crime, nor did they choose the house for its history. Yet they live with the awareness that strangers still know their address, still search for updates, still debate their choice online. In many ways, they became unwilling participants in a story they never asked to join. So, can a house be cleansed of its past? The answer depends on who you ask. For some, a home is only as dark as the people inside it. For others, certain places carry echoes that never fully disappear. In our next chapter, we'll confront the question head-on: would you live here? And what does our answer reveal about how we process tragedy, memory, and the uncomfortable truth that evil can exist in even the most ordinary places? At the center of this story is not just a house, but a question that continues to divide people long after the headlines faded. Would you live here? It's a simple question on the surface, yet the answers reveal something deeper about how we understand safety, memory, and human nature. For some, the answer is immediate and emotional. They say no, without hesitation. The knowledge of what happened inside the Watts family home is enough to make the walls feel oppressive, the rooms uncomfortable, and the silence unbearable. Even if the house is structurally perfect, even if years have passed, the history feels too heavy. These individuals believe that certain places become forever marked by violence, not because of superstition, but because memory itself is powerful. Others see it differently. They argue that the house did nothing wrong, that it was not the villain of the story. In their view, refusing to live there gives the crime more power than it deserves. They believe reclaiming the space, filling it with new routines, laughter, and life, is a way of refusing to let tragedy win. To them, moving in is not disrespectful, but defiant. This divide often reflects personal experience. Those who have lived through trauma may be more sensitive to place-based memory. A room can trigger emotions long after the event is over. Meanwhile, others rely on logic, reminding themselves that danger no longer exists, and that the person responsible will never walk free again. The Watts case forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The most horrifying crimes do not always happen in dark alleys or abandoned buildings. They happen in homes that look like ours, in neighborhoods like ours. And that realization unsettles us far more than the idea of a haunted house ever could. Perhaps the real discomfort isn't about living there. It's about recognizing how fragile the illusion of normalcy can be. The Watts home reminds us that evil doesn't announce itself. It blends in. It hides behind routine, smiles, and quiet streets. So when you ask yourself, would I live here? You're really asking something deeper. Could I separate a place from its past? Could I accept that tragedy can exist without warning and still choose to move forward? In the final chapter, we'll reflect on what this house represents today and why stories like this continue to hold such a powerful grip on us, long after the doors have closed and the lights have gone out. Today, the Watts family house stands much like any other home in the neighborhood. The lawn is maintained. The structure blends in once again with the surrounding houses. From the outside, there is little to suggest the darkness that once unfolded within its walls. And yet for many people, the shadow of that tragedy has never fully lifted. True crime stories endure because they force us to confront realities we would rather avoid. The Watts case is not remembered solely for its brutality, but for its familiarity. This was a family that looked normal, a home that looked safe, a life that appeared stable. And when that illusion collapsed, it left behind more than victims. It left behind a question mark over the very idea of security. The house became a vessel for that discomfort, not because it holds evil, but because it reminds us how close evil can be. When people search for updates about the Watts home or ask whether someone lives there now, they are not just curious about real estate. They are trying to make sense of how something so horrifying could happen in a place that looked so ordinary. For Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, the house was supposed to be a refuge. Their lives should not be reduced to an address or a crime scene. Yet the location remains tied to their story because it represents the final chapter of their lives, remembering that truth matters. For the current residents, the hope is simple: to live quietly, to create new memories, and to allow the house to finally be just a house again. Whether that is fully possible may depend less on the walls and more on the world's willingness to let the story rest. As we close this journey, the question still lingers. Would you live here? There is no right or wrong answer, only reflection. Because this house, like so many others touched by tragedy, reminds us that darkness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. The Watts family house is no longer a crime scene. The investigations are over. The court has spoken. The man responsible will never walk free again. And yet, the story refuses to end. Not because of the walls, the rooms, or the address, but because of what this case revealed about trust, appearances, and the fragile nature of family life. This house became a symbol not of evil itself, but of how easily evil can hide behind normalcy. It looked like safety. It looked like stability. It looked like a future. And that is why the tragedy struck such a deep chord around the world. People didn't just mourn the victims. They questioned their own assumptions about the lives unfolding behind closed doors everywhere. Asking, "Would you live here?" is ultimately about more than real estate. It's about whether we believe the past defines a place forever, or whether time, intention, and new memories can slowly loosen tragedy's grip. Some will always see the Watts home as a reminder of unbearable loss. Others will see it as proof that spaces can be reclaimed, even after the worst has happened. What must never be forgotten are the lives at the center of this story: Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. They were more than a headline, more than a house. Their memory deserves respect, not speculation, and remembrance rather than sensationalism. At Dark Corner, True Crime, our goal is not to glorify violence, but to understand it, to look carefully at the shadows so that the truth is not lost to time. If this story resonated with you, if it made you pause or reflect, thank you for being here. And as always, we invite you to carry the conversation forward in the comments below. Because sometimes, the most unsettling truths are not found in abandoned houses, but in the quiet realization that darkness can exist anywhere, even where we feel safest.